What kind of person enters a quiet home in the middle of the night, moves through familiar rooms without forcing a door, stands over two identical twin sisters as they sleep, and decides neither of them should wake up? No signs of a struggle, no screams heard by neighbors, no clear reason why they were chosen, just silence. On November 14th, 1986, in Willow Creek, a crime occurred so quietly, so deliberately, that nearly 40 years later, the truth is still hiding in the shadows. And the most terrifying question isn't who did it. It's whether the killer was someone the town trusted. Before the murders, Willow Creek was the kind of town people escaped to when the world felt too loud. A place tucked deep into Northern California's forests. A place where neighbors waved by name. Where children rode their bikes until the sun disappeared behind the trees. Where doors were often left unlocked, because nothing bad ever happened here. At least, that's what everyone believed. In 1986, Willow Creek was quiet, predictable, safe, the kind of town where rumors traveled faster than danger, because danger rarely showed up at all. Until it did. The Hans family was part of that normal life. Known, familiar, unremarkable in the best way. And the twin sisters, identical in appearance, inseparable in spirit, were known around town as just kids being kids. Same face, same laugh, same routines, different dreams. They went to school, they had friends, they lived the kind of life no one thought twice about. Because no one ever imagines tragedy knocking on a door it doesn't need to break into. November 14th, 1986 began like any other Friday. No warnings, no arguments heard, no signs of fear. The twins went about their day, unaware that it would be their last. No one noticed anything strange. No one reported seeing anyone unfamiliar. And that's what makes this case so terrifying. Nothing stood out. As night fell over Willow Creek, the town settled into its usual silence. Lights went off one by one. The forest grew darker, and somewhere inside a home that felt safe enough to sleep in, something unthinkable was unfolding. But here's the part that still sends chills through the town decades later. No one heard screaming. No neighbor called police. No dog barked in warning. Whatever happened that night happened quietly. When morning came, Willow Creek woke up expecting another ordinary day. Instead, it stepped into a nightmare. A crime so personal, so precise, that it didn't just take 2 lives.
It stole the town's sense of safety forever. And as word began to spread, one question echoed from house to house, from whisper to whisper. How could something this horrific happen here, without anyone noticing? And if no one saw it coming, who was the danger all along? To understand why this case still echoes through time, you have to understand who the Hans twin sisters were. They were not strangers to danger. They were not living on the edge. They were not hiding secrets. They were simply children of Willow Creek, raised in a town where trust was part of everyday life, and fear felt unnecessary. The sisters were identical in appearance, but those close to them say their personalities were different. One quieter, more observant, the other more outgoing, more expressive. But no matter their differences, they were inseparable. They shared the same room, the same routines, the same sense of safety. In a town this small, everyone knew them. Teachers struggled to tell them apart. Neighbors waved when they passed. They were simply known as the twins, a familiar presence in a place where familiarity meant comfort. They went to school. They came home. They lived ordinary lives filled with ordinary concerns. Homework, friendships, small dreams about the future. And that ordinariness is what makes this story so disturbing. There were no signs of trouble, no warnings, no fear in their voices. They trusted their home. They trusted their town. They trusted the quiet. And that trust would become their greatest vulnerability. Because whoever entered that house that night did not see 2 children. They did not see innocence. They saw opportunity. someone who knew where they lived, someone who knew when they would be asleep, someone who didn't need to force their way in. The realization that the twins were targeted, not randomly, not impulsively, changes everything. They weren't living recklessly. They weren't searching for danger. Danger came to them. On November 14, 1986, the safety they believed in was taken from them forever. And as investigators would soon begin to understand, the killer didn't break into their world. They walked straight through it. There was no shattered glass, no splintered doorframe, no sign of forced entry. Whoever came that night didn't break in. They were let in, by silence, by familiarity, by trust. They moved through the house with certainty, not cautiously, not urgently, with the confidence of someone who had been there before. And that detail would become one of the most disturbing realizations of the entire investigation. Because panic doesn't erupt when danger feels recognizable. Fear doesn't scream when it thinks it understands. The twins didn't run, they didn't fight, they didn't cry out for help. Which tells investigators something chilling. The threat did not feel like a threat at first. In Willow Creek, familiarity was everything. It was safety. It was belonging. It was the reason doors stayed unlocked and windows stayed open. That night, that same familiarity became a weapon. The house remained quiet. Dogs didn't bark. Neighbors slept through the darkness. Nothing shattered the illusion of peace. Until morning. When the truth surfaced, it didn't just shock the town, it fractured it. Parents stopped letting children walk alone. Doors that had never been locked were suddenly bolted. Curtains were drawn tighter. Because if this could happen to the twins, the girls everyone waved at, the children who did nothing reckless, the ones who lived ordinary, careful lives, then no one was truly safe. Investigators didn't see chaos at the scene. They saw control. Every detail suggested patience, planning, someone who knew the rhythms of the household, bedtimes, silence, routines. This wasn't an explosion of anger. It was calculated. And that realization changed everything, because it meant the danger didn't arrive randomly. It didn't stumble into Willow Creek. It already lived there, close enough to watch, close enough to wait. By the time investigators stepped deeper into the case, one truth became unavoidable. This wasn't about who could commit the crime. It was about who wouldn't be suspected. In a town like Willow Creek, danger didn't wear a mask. It wore familiarity. Detectives began doing the unthinkable. They stopped looking outward and started looking around. Friends, neighbors, people who had waved at the twins just days before. People who knew their names without thinking. Every interview carried an unspoken tension, because every answer came from someone who had never imagined being questioned. No one fit the picture at first. No criminal history, no obvious motive, no sign of violence. And that made it worse, because whoever did this wasn't reckless. They were careful. They didn't leave behind chaos. They left behind confusion. Investigators mapped routines. Who lived close enough to watch? Who knew the family's habits? Who understood when the house would be quiet? And slowly, the circle tightened.
And slowly, the circle tightened. But here's what made the case unravel emotionally. There was no single moment where suspicion exploded. Instead, it crept. A comment that didn't quite sit right. A timeline that felt slightly off. A reaction that lingered too long, or not long enough. In small towns, everyone knows everyone, which means everyone has something to hide, even if it's just the fear of being looked at differently. As days passed, the pressure mounted. People began watching one another. Ordinary conversations turned cautious. Silence started to feel louder than words, because the realization settled in. The killer wasn't hiding from Willow Creek. They were hiding within it. And then came the most disturbing shift of all. Investigators began to believe the twins were not collateral damage. They were not victims of opportunity. They were chosen. Someone had watched them grow up. Someone had seen them as more than children, someone who felt entitled to enter their world.
That possibility changed how every memory was re-examined. Every smile, every greeting, every harmless interaction from the past suddenly felt unstable. Parents began replaying conversations in their heads. Neighbors questioned moments they had once brushed aside. Because when danger wears a familiar face, memory becomes evidence. And still, no arrest, no clear suspect, no confession. Just a town holding its breath, waiting. Because the most terrifying part wasn't that the killer might strike again. It was the possibility that they never had to. They had already done what they came to do, and they were still out there, living normal lives, passing unnoticed, protected by the same trust that once kept the twins safe. Beat. Which raises the question that haunts this case to this day. If the truth was hiding in plain sight, who chose not to see it?
As the years passed, the noise faded, but the questions never did. The case slipped into silence, not because it was solved, but because there was nothing left to say without answers. No arrest, no confession, no justice that matched the loss. The Hans twin sisters remained frozen in time, forever children, forever ordinary, forever remembered for the trust that failed them. Willow Creek moved on the way small towns always do. New families arrived. Old stories softened at the edges. But beneath the calm, something never fully healed, because everyone remembers the moment they realized safety could be an illusion. That realization doesn't disappear with time. It changes how you lock your doors, how you look at familiarity, how you teach your children to trust, and when not to. The silence surrounding this case is not empty. It is heavy, heavy with what was never said, heavy with what may never be known. And maybe that's why this story still echoes, not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. Because someone, somewhere, knows exactly what happened that night. They have lived with it for decades. They have carried it quietly. They have been protected by time, by distance, by silence. But silence is not the same as innocence. And time does not erase truth. It only waits. So if this story unsettled you, if it made you question the comfort of familiarity, if it reminded you how easily trust can be exploited, then don't let it end here. Share this story. Talk about it. Keep the names alive. Because cases like this don't fade because they don't matter. They fade because we stop looking. And sometimes, the only thing that stands between silence and justice is memory. Pause. If you believe the Hans twin sisters deserve to be remembered, if you believe unanswered questions still deserve attention, subscribe, stay with us, and help keep the quiet from swallowing the truth. Because as long as this story is told, the silence hasn't won.